What I'm going to talk about really is how we define the box, basically, because outside of the box is the environment. If this is the system that I'm in, outside of the box is the environment. And when I was a student of architecture and planning in the 60s, basically, most of the work we did was drawing, basically. So we used to draw the box in lots of different ways. Nobody ever wrote any papers in those days. Our lecturers wrote the occasional book, this sort of thing, but they also gave us lots and lots of books. And the books that I remember from the 1960s were Ross Ashby, Introduction to Cybernetics, etc., Stafford Beer, Decision and Control. They were all to do with the systems approach. And of course, the systems approach is really all about what's in the box and what's out of the box, basically. So geography is all about defining boundaries in some sense, what's in the box. And my slides here actually show two examples, basically. The pictures of Britain, it's not the UK, it's Britain, and in particular, we're building models of Britain and not the UK, Britain being England, Scotland, and Wales. And the reason being that it's exceptionally difficult to actually add Northern Ireland and to look at the sort of models that we build, which are all flow models. You can see accessibility in terms of the yellow colors, etc. You can also see the flow, the vector flow maps, basically. And in some senses, we could tell a story really about, what is urban in this particular context, basically, in a sense. So the question really is in terms of the kind of class of models that we often build, spatial models, spatial interaction models, agent-based models, and so on. The critical issue is, where do we define the boundary? And of course, many of these models that we've built in the past, we've wrestled with this idea of, if we're trying to model London, for example, how far out do we go, for example? And there are lots of anecdotal things we could actually say about that. But of course, we've got to the point where we can model the whole island, basically, the island of Britain in this particular context. But again, it's quite relevant to the idea of a planetary sort of expansion and so on in this context. Now, there are lots and lots of boundary problems contained in these pictures. The bottom slides actually show the kind of model that we've been building. Traditionally, we tended to build on models which were predicting demography from economy, and increasingly we're now putting them together. We're dealing with the simultaneity, in a sense. How do we define how employment and population relate to each other, and so in some sense. So there are lots of boundary problems in terms of what we define, in terms of systems problems define these particular boxes. There's a couple of papers there that we've written that tell you a little bit more about what we're doing in this sense. This is our workhorse in CASA. That model, which we call Quant of the UK, is being used to do lots and lots of things to look at, millions of scenarios these days with high-powered computers and so on. And so in some senses, these really resonate with this whole idea of system and environment and the boundary.